research and development beyond, our wildest dreams. And it was all built up for good reason. We can debate, World War II, but it was built up to respond to specific threats in a specific time and place. Well, what do you do when all of that goes away and the threat is gone and the world war is won? And well, you start looking, you either dismantle it and put a lot of people out of work and take a lot of people's jobs here in Washington that had been created and built up over time. Budgets have been built up and created over time, and you just let it evaporate? Or do you look for new threats and new reasons and justifications for this massive architecture? And at first it seemed easy because the United States, Washington, had decided that the Soviet Union would be that new threat. And so we had the Cold War to justify that massive buildup. Over the 10-year period after World War II and the Korean War, I think Eisenhower was starting to get a little concerned, and that's reflected in his farewell speech in 1961, that all of this being built up, that the massive amounts of money that were being budgeted for weapon systems would create a special interest in Washington that was representing the defense companies, the defense contracting industry, and that we would soon find out who was leading whom in terms of our foreign policy and our national security. Was it real threats that we were responding to, or were they threats and concerns and what would you call it, like was it the industrial complex basically creating new justifications for itself and leading Washington by the nose? And so he worried about that. He coined the military industrial complex. And I don't think he would even recognize what it is today. I think he had a kernel of insight in terms of what the problems could be, that the American life could be impacted in such a way that war was almost inevitable because of this military industrial machinery that we had built up that would make it almost reflexive, that we would be on a war footing at all times. I mean, that's come true in spades. And so we look at things like our issues like China, for example, and we have an entire Congress. I would say the majority of members of Congress are either afraid to talk out against the military industrial complex or are all too happy because they're getting campaign contributions from the defense industry, who have been pushing for more money, more weapon systems, more nuclear weapons, more so every year that I'm in Washington reporting about this stuff. And they use China as the driving threat right now. Unfortunately, we've had another war break out in Ukraine, in which, again, the justification is if we don't pour billions of dollars of weapons into Ukraine, that somehow we will be falling down on our own national defense. And I don't buy that. I don't buy that we have to be engaging in a proxy war in Ukraine, but the powers in Washington have twisted it so that their justification for increasing budgets is, global peace or regional peace. And if we don't, Russia is going to take over that part of the world. And so wherever it may be, whether it be in the Balkans, Iraq, Middle East, North Africa, to China, Asia Pacific, there's always a justification for more war, but it's all about, keeping that military industrial complex humming.
And what I would call, Kelley, the war economy. Yeah. I mean, it sounds perhaps like a crude term, but I think it's a very real thing. given the fact that I really appreciate how you've outlined everything for the listeners, because there really is a concrete through line, and these threats, whether real or imagined, as you outline, there's a monetary factor in the back of all of this too, as you talked about the political contributions and you laid all of that out. But there is, I mean, the war economy, I think, accounts, and you can talk about this far better than I, accounts for a vast amount of the budgetary considerations of Congress and of government here in the United States. And every time I look around, when there is a new vote in the Senate or in the House on defense spending, it passes virtually
Yeah,
unanimously all the time, doesn't it?
it does. And you're quite right about the war economy, because I'm talking a little abstractedly about the budgets, but over time, these defense contractors aren't stupid. They've managed to take a massive program like, say, the F-35 fighter, and made sure that a piece of that, just a small piece of that plane, is made in one state. And then another piece is made in another state. And the engine's made over here, and the propellers are over here, and the microchips are over here. And it invests states, but also those states' representatives in the program. So when it comes time for campaign re-election time, nobody wants to be the one that's called out. Oh, you want to get rid of the F-35? You mean you want to get rid of these 2,000 jobs we have in Florida, or these 2,000 jobs we have in North Carolina, or these 500 jobs we have in Connecticut? And they've managed to sprinkle a little piece. And maybe your listeners might be like, well, that doesn't sound that bad. We have these jobs and people need jobs. And if you're, but there's been plenty of studies over time, and I don't have them right in front of me, that will talk about how these jobs, these particular programs, as big as they are and as expensive, don't really translate into massive amounts of jobs for people, and that you could probably take away that particular piece of the F-35 or another program and replace it, take that money and replace it and put it into green jobs or education or healthcare, pharmaceuticals, whatever. There is this mythology around defense jobs that I think needs to be dismantled, or at least debated more rigorously, because I believe, on one hand, plenty of, let's say, left of center folks are fine with dismantling the military industrial complex because they don't like war. They never liked war. They might not even like the military itself. Okay, so we got all these people around our side to sort of do something about the military industrial complex. What about the people from the center to the right? One of the things that they've bought off on is that defense industry, the defense industry creates jobs. So I think we need to push back on that and say, they don't create as many jobs as you think. And the military industrial complex, the companies that have flourished, the number of them have shrunk over time, because, like the big tech industry, they basically have gobbled up all the little guys over time. And so they are managing to get contracts there in which they are really making hand over fist, robbing the American taxpayer. The Pentagon and Congress say, well, we don't have anybody else that can do it except for Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, Raytheon, and Boeing. So we'll just give them what they asked for. And a lot of contracts end up being no bid, or they bid a certain amount, and then over time, suddenly the project becomes more complicated and they have to charge more. And so I don't think we're really getting the bang for the buck. And I don't think the number of jobs have actually increased as they've gobbled up, more of the action, more of the market. So what you have is a monopoly by top 5 companies who are overcharging us and extending programs that maybe aren't really that soluble. Like, we have programs like the F-35, which have been around for 20 years, and the plane is still failing tests, operational tests. That's fine for Lockheed because they're still getting their money. But how is it for the Navy, which had commissioned these planes, or the pilots that have to fly them?